A quick note before we begin. I'm going to try to keep some of the feel and plot points of the Twisted Ones so it doesn't feel like too wildly different of a story. Such as, I came up with a line of alternate animatronics I might have used instead of the Twisted Ones, but I will still use the Twisted Ones in this story to keep it in line with the original book. Now then, let's begin. The book opens on a nightmare, or a memory, of a night long forgotten at the diner. Of a costume closet and a door. Of that horrible night. We are reintroduced to Charlie as she is woken by knocking on her car window. It is Jessica, who is not too happy to see that Charlie spent the night in her car. Charlie explains that she had a fight with her aunt the night before and after driving around for a while had decided to sleep in her car in the university parking lot, rather than wake Jessica or return back to her aunt's. But it's okay because she has a bat in reaching distance. Jessica, thoroughly concerned and unamused, invites her in to freshen up in her dorm room, as they don't have classes for a while. It is established that it has been a year since the events of the Silver Eyes and life has changed quite a bit, but things have been going pretty well for Charlie. She has been all but thriving, if a little swamped by school, but the events of the year before are mostly a faded memory. She has had closure from Freddy's. Until now. The nightmare last night isn't new. She's been having them for a few days now. Charlie freshens up and gets changed, during which Jessica watches the news about the cleanup from a major storm that hit Hurricane a few days ago. She notes that she is relieved that Charlie didn't sleep in her car that night, but asks what she and her aunt fought about. Charlie says that it was about old business. What she doesn't say is that she and her aunt began to fight after she started asking questions about her family and the past, spurned on from these nightmares about Sammy. Charlie is afraid to tell Jessica about this after Jen's reaction and pretends she's fine as they eventually head in for their separate classes. She attends a class, but finds her mind wandering. The memories of that night when her brother was taken feel remarkably fresh and she doesn't know why. Later that day she's called by Clay Burke, who gives her the news that there's been storm damage to her house, thinking that she wanted to know and offering to drive her over to look. She declines, reluctant to return to the house, but after a few minutes of walking she finds herself at her car, having changed her mind, and drives to the house alone. There she finds that the storm has opened up the floorboards in the garage into a secret basement that had been sealed up long ago. She looks in with a flashlight and after spotting the stairs, realizes that the door must have been sealed up and then blocked by a cabinet. She uses a ladder from behind the house to climb down and finds an animatronic workshop and unfinished parts and endoskeletons and even a workbench. On the bench she finds a rabbit that looks a lot like Theodore, just unfinished. Interested in cleaning it up, she takes it with her to fix it up for her robotics class. There is more to the basement though, and she goes through to find a musty, dark room. There's a rank smell and she shines her flashlight ahead only for it to land on a face staring back at her. It's Foxy. Not the Foxy she recalls from Freddy's, but a Foxy. It's old and in disrepair. The mold of its silicone mask has peeled back and revealed a surprisingly garish endoskeleton. Its teeth are much too sharp to be just for show, like needles protruding from its jaw. A quick note, but in this version there are no illusion discs. The Twisted Ones are decayed enough that their pleasant exterior has started to wear away, revealing the deadly contraptions hiding underneath. Charlie freezes up on the spot, shocked, but the face does not move. The animatronic is, as expected, completely deactivated. Having flashbacks to the attack by Foxy, Charlie decides to back out of the room and back into the workshop. While it doesn't follow her, she feels like she's being watched. She quickly leaves the basement with the rabbit. Back in her car, she considers calling Clay to tell him about the animatronics, but wonders if it's a good idea. While the Foxy freaked her out, She's afraid the news will get back to her aunt. But that smell in the basement was wrong. Not a smell like gas, but a smell of decay. She's startled by her phone ringing and answers it to find that it's John. Apparently Carlton heard about the house getting damaged too and called him, and he calls her to offer to go over and look at the damage with her. She reveals that she's there and tells him about the workshop and the basement, but doesn't tell him about the Foxy. She says she's leaving. John asks if she wants to go see a movie tomorrow night, as it's Friday and she won't have classes the next day. Charlie asks him if he's trying to get her on a date. John assures her that it is not a date, but now that she's reminded him, yes, he would like to try that Thai place that just opened up. She agrees and ends the call, wondering why she feels so jittery if it's supposedly not a date. Oh right, she just ran into Foxy. She calls Clay. We don't see the conversation between the two, but Clay wasn't too concerned about the animatronics. That is, he thinks they'll be safe where they are until he can get some people to check and secure them before removing them. The same people he trusted with moving the Freddy animatronics. Charlie does not know where the Freddy animatronics are, but she's confident that Clay put them somewhere where they won't cause issues. That evening she starts tinkering with the other Theodore in Jessica's dorm while Jessica's just hanging out, doing her nails. When all of a sudden Charlie finds something unexpected. There is a key hidden inside of the rabbit. A tiny key. She has a feeling it's significant and keeps it, planning to accompany Clay into the basement whenever he goes to look for where the key goes. Charlie has another nightmare about the night Sammy was taken. Except this time it is not Afton, but her father, coming in to pick her up from the costume closet. He leaves Sammy behind in the closet and as Charlie looks back for him, the door slams closed. She wakes up only to find Jessica getting ready while watching the news intensely. This is because there is a story on the news reporting that a woman was mauled while walking home the night before. It is mentioned on the news that it is an expected animal attack, though she was found mangled, with one of her legs missing. Much to both women's horror. As it goes to commercial, Jessica looks to Charlie, who she sees is now awake. They stare at each other for a second. Then she's like, okay, so let's figure out what you're going to wear for your date. And while Charlie thinks that was a little sudden, she realized that, no. She would rather not talk about that gruesome newscast. She doesn't want to talk about the date either. It's not a date, she insists, and she's just going to wear whatever she's wearing to school. Jessica pouts a little because she was looking for an excuse to doll Charlie up. She notices and mentions that Charlie looks tired. Charlie excuses it on staying up late working and willingly expresses concern that things with John will be awkward. Jessica assures her that they won't, and also assures her that she's not obligated to do anything she doesn't want to. Charlie decides to go on the date. That evening, Charlie goes to the movie and dinner with John. The movie turns out to be pretty bad and she ends up laughing at what's obviously not supposed to be a funny moment. She tries to stifle it, but catches John looking at her with a smile. For some reason, that moment sticks with her. They go out to dinner and catch up on how life's been. John reveals that he's been working construction and helping the cleanup around town. Charlie talks about college, and they are having a fine time when Charlie starts getting a weird feeling. Maybe it has to do with the sun going down, but she feels nervous. John notices, but doesn't bring it up. After dinner, he offers to go for a walk in the nearby park, to which she agrees. She jokingly brings up the mauling the night before and John gets a look of realization and regret for what he just agreed to. But they still end up going on the walk. During it, Charlie starts to open up a little about her dreams. John seems concerned, but Charlie brushes it off. He recognizes that she's hiding her feelings, but before he can assure her further, they hear a noise in the trees. It sounds a little like music. They go to check it out after a moment of consideration and find a weird little hole in the ground. A dip in the dirt. It sounds like muffled music is coming up through it. Though instead of reaching a hand in, John grabs a stick and pokes. And a massive mouth of teeth breaks through the ground and snaps shut. Out from the ground rises a massive bear animatronic. Its body in poor shape, its eye falling out, its silicone face peeling back to reveal needle-like teeth underneath, and its belly split open like a gaping maw, clawing out of the dirt and to its feet. Charlie and John flee as it chases them all the way back to the parking lot where they left the car. Only then do they realize they cannot hear it and look back only to see that it is no longer there. Something stopped it from following them. John insists they drive to the police station, and while on the way, Charlie pieces together that the bear must have stopped its pursuit because of the semi-busy restaurant. Maybe it's afraid to have been seen. John agrees. He points out, with dread, that means it is intelligent enough to know to not be seen. The police, obviously, doubt John and Charlie's story. Except for Clay, who pulls them into his office and hears them out. He sends a few cops out to check, but they don't find anything. Frightened, John and Charlie end up staying the night at the police station. They are awoken the next morning by Clay, both slumped on the couch, and look up to find him with a dour look. Another woman was mauled this morning, he reveals, and the wounds seem to match this possible animatronic. The next day, Charlie meets up with all of her friends proper. John and Jessica, of course, Marla, Carlton, and Lamar. While they do not have a huge impact in the story, I think it's important to show that they are present and do care, if simply for consistency's sake. So, I have this idea, but it's one of those ones I can't fully formulate unless I get into writing it. So, I'll describe it the best I can. Charlie stays the night with Jessica, but is getting an uncomfortable feeling. She feels like she's being watched, but with Jessica asleep and her unable to do so, she heads out to go to the vending machine. The dorms are silent tonight, eerily, and there's a strange smell in the air. It almost makes her sick. It smells like it did in the basement. As she's coming back to the room, she finds something waiting down the hallway. Illuminated by the light of the window at the end of the hall is a familiar figure. A hulking rabbit with decaying, gnarled flesh poking through the mildewed suit. It is Afton. She can barely believe it, questions if she's hallucinating. Before she can call for help, though she is silently frozen, Springtrap raises a finger to his lips to shush her and then makes a cutting motion across his neck. She doesn't know if he's threatening to kill her or kill anyone she tries to get help from, but she knows he's capable and willing of both. She makes a run for it and Afton proceeds to stalk her around the campus. She doesn't have her keys, she can't risk attracting unwanted attention and have someone else get killed, and the tree lines are dangerous. I also consider having a scene where Charlie sees the university security patrol car parked on the far side of the parking lot by the tree line edge of the campus and runs over. Only to go around to the driver's side and find a blood trail leading into some damaged bushes. She can hear a mushy noise and squeaking sounds and steps slightly to the side to see better. And in the dull light she can see the silhouette of a large animatronic with peeling yellow skin sucking and crunching a human body into its belly, with the legs sticking out. Charlie turns and runs as fast as she can. In the back of her mind she vaguely connects that it must have been Chica. After a long segment of Charlie evading the pursuing Afton, she gets back to Jessica's dorm and wakes her up. While Jessica is shocked, she understands the gravity of the situation and says they have to get her out of there. They race downstairs and get in Jessica's car and she starts to leave the parking lot, only to have their way unexpectedly blocked by the massive form of a shuffling Bonnie. its face all but worn away and its upper jaw missing, leaving a gaping opening in its head. Jessica realizes it's too big to drive into, but when she starts putting it in reverse and looks into the mirror, she freezes. Charlie looks back to see that Afton is behind the car, shuffling towards them. While his suit is decayed, he is towering, frightening in the moonlight. Then Jessica throws her car in reverse and squeals her tires, trying to hit him. Springtrap has fast enough reflexes to jump out of the way. In fact, as Charlie realizes now, he has more the reflexes of an animatronic than a human. Seemingly slow and shuffling, but really something much worse. He and Jessica make brief eye contact before she peels out, just swerving around Twisted Bonnie, and driving away from the university. The two are somewhat panicking. Charlie, adrenaline high, rambles out that she thinks these animatronics might have come out of her father's basement, and reveals the finding to Jessica. Jessica is shocked, asking why she didn't tell her, and she explains it all. At the mention of Clay, Jessica narrows her gaze and realizes where she's going. Clay Burke is woken up at 2 in the morning by Jessica banging on his door. Cut to a few minutes later, Charlie and Jessica have told their story. But Clay's not the only one who heard it. Betty, his wife, finds out about what happened with the animatronics back at Freddy's, having not gotten all the details from Clay. She is, understandably, furious. They start to bicker. Carlton walks in and walks right back out. Then the two have a quiet fight in their bedroom. Charlie and Jessica feel guilty and awkward respectively, but know this isn't entirely their fault. They eventually go to sleep on Clay's couch, with Charlie only falling asleep once the sun starts coming up. She has dreams about Sammy again, and wakes up at the sound of the front door closing and finds Jessica already up and Carlton watching TV on mute. He almost nonchalantly reveals that his mother's going to stay with his aunt for a while. Charlie is apologetic, but Carlton assures her that this has been coming for a while. He shows a second of something, maybe sadness or frustration, but it isn't at her. Later that day, Clay decides to be upfront with her, totally ignoring what happened the night before. Meanwhile, he brings her into his office with Jessica and Carlton, and shows them pictures of the victims of the recent maulings, of which there has been a few. Living pictures, not pictures of their bodies. They're horrified to see that the women all match Charlie's description. There's slight differences in them, but they're close enough in age, hair color, skin color, to show a resemblance. If that really was William Afton who showed up at the university, Clay deduces, then he is likely in control of the animatronics and they are all searching for Charlie. Carlton points out how stupid it is to just send animatronic hunting anyone with brown hair and eyes, and what's the chances of him getting Charlie? Charlie notes, bitterly, that might be the point. That it gives him an excuse to kill as many people in the process as he wants. Jessica and Carlton's silence suggests that they agree. Charlie confesses her suspicions that the animatronics that were in the basement are the ones now let loose and Clay believes her. But he is reluctant to scour the basement until these animatronics are contained. Clay insists Charlie stays that night at his house, promising he'll protect her there, and heads to the police station to figure out a plan on how they can take out these animatronics. Charlie finally shows Jessica and Carlton the key and says that she thinks it's somehow connected to Sammy. She needs to go back to her house and see where the key goes. Jessica is against it, but Charlie believes the animatronics must have left the basement. Though after she says this she flashes on Foxy, noticing that he is the only one they haven't seen. She doubts he is still down there, but she also fears that he is. In the end, she decides to take the chance. She will just have to come prepared, and asks if they can make a stop on the way. They make it to the house and head inside. Jessica scrunches up her nose and says she smells gas. Charlie's just glad that she can't smell Afton lurking around. Carlton then makes exactly 3 guesses to what Afton smells like before Jessica shoots him down. They get to the garage and the ladder is still there, and Charlie and Carlton decide to climb down while Jessica stays up top to keep an eye out and make sure to get them out if anything happens. The ladder has dried mud on the steps, Charlie realizes. Someone else has been down here. She doubts the animatronics used it to get out. She and Carlton start looking around the workshop and the bench where she found the rabbit, but she can't find where the key goes. She suggests they check the other room, to which Carlton gets this look and calls back to Jessica to get ready to call an ambulance. Charlie gives him this look in return. Then she heads through the doorway. And her light again lands on the face of Foxy across from her, and her breath hitches, because while he stands in the same spot, its face is angled differently. Before it was aimed in her direction, but now it was looking directly at her. And then it moves. Charlie pulls back through the door with a run when Foxy rushes them. Charlie and Carlton evade Foxy around a small room, only able to dodge him because he is fast but clumsy. He throws himself at Charlie and crashes into whatever furniture is in the way. Charlie's pinned between the workbench, Foxy, and the cabinet. Foxy just splintered apart, including all the sharp, heavy metal parts that were knocked out of it. That's when she pulls out her secret weapon, a self-defense taser, and tries to shock him. Unfortunately, it is too weak to do anything against its ragged suit. She barely gets back from it swinging at her, its claws slicing through part of her jacket. Carlton distracts it by throwing whatever he can grab at it, mostly pieces of wood and debris from the fallen roof. Charlie realizes that the only way she might be able to shock Foxy if she hits its metal, likely on its head. It takes dodging and close calls, all of which I can't well describe unless I was actually writing out the fight scene, because in my head it literally looks like running circles around Foxy. She finally gets him in a position where she can get him. But only likely because he's grabbed her, and as his belly splits open into large rows of teeth. As Carlton tries to wrestle her out of Foxy's arms and gets one of her arms free enough for her to strike, she jabs the taser into his exposed eye, past the peeling mask, and shocks him so hard that his servos go reeling. With him staggered, Carlton yanks Charlie free and the two run for the ladder. Carlton pushes Charlie to climb first and he follows, but as she gets up so does Foxy. It rushes the ladder and crashes into it, now bent hook catching Carlton's shoe and ripping it off. He's dangling off the edge of the loose floorboards, and Charlie and Jessica struggle to pull him up as the edge creaks with strain. But they get him up and the three watch Foxy continuing to circle the basement. It shirks away from direct light, just as Freddy shirked away from being spotted by the crowd. They are safe for the moment, but that doesn't bode well for that night. Before we continue, I actually have a few alternate scenarios for this encounter. One involves Charlie getting into the back room and trying to escape through the tunnel the Twisted Ones dug out and getting stuck and sinking into the mud as Foxy's clawing out after her. Maybe Carlton comes back down and tries to distract Foxy, or picks up Charlie's dropped taser and manages to tase Foxy himself. This could lead to Carlton getting injured enough to go to the hospital and Charlie meeting up with her friends in the parking lot. I'm going to continue on like the first scenario I read out is what happened, because I think that is the better one of the two. They get back to Clay's to find Marla waiting outside. She fusses on Carlton. Jason's there too because she has to watch him, and there's a brief exchange where he asks questions about the animatronics. Obviously concerned about what's going on and afraid this is going to be like what happened last time with Afton. They do not tell him Afton has returned. Like with Marla and Lamar, I think it is important to at least give Jason a cameo considering how important he was to the first book. Acknowledging him even if he is not involved this time, so that it makes his sudden drop from the plot have a slightly softer landing. They stay the afternoon at Clay's and eventually the rest of their friends come by, including John. Evening comes. It's getting late and Charlie's been outside for a while. John goes out to find her and finds her on the phone with her aunt. He steps back in to give her a moment of privacy as she finishes up. Jen called to make up with Charlie, which they do. However, Charlie doesn't seem happy. Jen is trying her hardest to talk around the subject, refusing to even mention the subject of the fight. Charlie's initial problem of them not being able to talk about it still stands. She tells her she's been staying with Jessica and plans to tonight, which Jen is alright with, and they end the call. Charlie steps in to tell John she's off the phone. He reminds her that it's probably not safe for her to be outside, to which she admits that she was trying to see if anything would show up. John asks her politely yet firmly to not do that. After an awkward silence, John decides to broach the subject as Charlie seems bothered. She decides to open up to him about her feelings with her aunt. How she doesn't even know how her aunt feels because she's clammed up about it so long, how she doesn't know what she wants. Eventually the conversation gets around to John asking what Charlie wants. She admits she wants to split a dorm with Jessica, but she doesn't want to abandon her aunt. John points out that all Jen ever wanted was for Charlie to be able to take care of herself, right? Charlie agrees. Then she will be happy that Charlie's making a decision for herself. John asks if she wants him to stay, but she says she doesn't. Jessica's already stuck here. Clay said there were going to be officers parked in a car outside, and she really doesn't want to put another person in the line of fire. It's bad enough that Carlton's not going to his aunt's like his father recommended. John doesn't want to go, she can tell, but he agrees to. But before he can get in his car, Charlie stops him and tells him that she had a nice time hanging out with him. John is glad to hear it and asks, when this is all over, if she will go to another movie with him. She asks if one wasn't enough. He clarifies that he meant a good movie. This actually gets a little laugh out of her, and he confesses that he loves to hear her laugh, which flusters her a little. Equally flustered, he jokingly apologizes for making it creepy and hastily heads to his car. As he leaves, she realizes that, date or not, she did have a good time with him. She considers going out with him again. Charlie and Jessica go to sleep while Clay stays awake to keep an eye out, and it's no more than a little after midnight when he starts hearing something outside. He tries to radio the officers outside, but they aren't responding. He steps into the living room to look out the window, but is stopped when he sees a large, hulking shadow shuffling past through the curtain. He takes a partial step back, knowing he needs to wake the kids and get them to safety, but though he doesn't make a sound, the shuffling figure stops. He can almost hear the squelching of rubber and faux fur stuck on squeaking metal. And then he hears the resounding crash as the window is shattered. Charlie and Jessica are woken by the noise, with Charlie getting out there first to see Twisted Bonnie trying to climb through the front window. Clay yells for Charlie to run. Charlie gets back to the guest room, running into Jessica on the way and pushing her back in, and runs for the window to climb out. She's halfway out and about to reach the ground when she stops abruptly. She hears music, familiar music, and looks down to see sunken dirt beneath the window. She realizes that Twisted Freddy is buried directly under the window. She whispers for Jessica to help pull her in, which she starts to until those jaws rise from the dirt and snap shut. Her barely able to pull her legs up in time before getting pulled through the window. She and Jessica flee the guest room and run into Carlton and Clay. Clay, now armed with the shotgun from his office, tells them all to hide in the basement. Charlie, Jessica, and Carlton escape into the basement where they find figures covered in tarps. Carlton doesn't know what they are and Charlie approaches one against Jessica's warnings and pulls the sheet off. It's Chica. The original Chica, still in disrepair but now totally deactivated. Uncovering the others, she finds Freddy, Bonnie, and Foxy are there as well. Clay has been hiding them down here since the incident last year. They wonder if they're still haunted and if they could turn them back on to help them, but Charlie cannot find a way to do so, and Carlton just goading them to get up doesn't seem to do any good. There's a bang upstairs, a shotgun going off, and something is shuffling closer to the basement stairs. Either the three decide to hide, which might be the better option, or Charlie's looking for a weapon, but she gets into the little closet under the stairs and the door gets shut. Perhaps by Jessica trying to hide her, though not realizing the door stuck, just thinking she's shutting it. Either way, Charlie's in there. During which, she has an increasingly vivid flashback to when Sammy was taken. She's remembering details that she shouldn't, even down to the smell of the closet, the sound of the music coming from outside the door. And she can't tell if they're actual details or if she's having a vivid hallucination. This is the first time she starts to question her sanity. If it's sleep deprivation or something beyond that. There's a crack from the basement door as it's forced open and she hears slow, methodical footsteps down the stairs above her. Heavier than Clay's, but slow and restrained, and she knows it has to be Springtrap. This is confirmed when he begins calling for her, telling her how there's no point in hiding and how he will eventually get what he wants. He stalks through the basement, past both Carlton and Jessica's own hiding spots, and eventually makes his way to the door under the stairs. She can smell the rotten stench leaking through the slat door as he stands there. Then he slowly opens the door. There's a gaping wound in his belly where Clay fired off a round on him. There is also plenty of blood that isn't his. "There you are," he says. "How very precious of you." And then something swings out from the side and swipes through the molded fabric on the side of Springtrap's head. It is Foxy. And it's not just Foxy either. Springtrap looks around to see that the original Freddy band, his original victims, are getting up to come after him. His presence has awoken them from their rest and they are prepared to finish where they left off. As Springtrap is fighting them off, swarmed but now undead and thus more able to hold his own, Charlie gets out from the crawl space. She can only stare for a second before being grabbed by Jessica and pulled up the stairs. Springtrap yells after her. Carlton makes an inappropriate comment back. They make it upstairs only to realize that the Twisted Ones are actively searching the house. They also find Clay, who has been stabbed in the back. Running off adrenaline, he says he's fine and gets them out of the house. Obviously he's not fine, but Clay seems like the type of person who would walk off a stab wound if there was a giant monster rabbit running around. As they're running for the car, Charlie looks over to see the police car with its doors open and nobody inside. She has a bad feeling that they too may be strewn somewhere in the tree line. They get into Jessica's car, since she still has her keys and Clay can't drive anyway, and peel out. Just then Twisted Foxy runs onto the road and Jessica has to swerve to avoid him, taking out a mailbox in the process. She floors it and they get away from Twisted Foxy, frantically wondering where to go next. Both Jessica and Carlton are freaked out about the stab wound and want to take Clay to the hospital. He's trying to call through to the police station for backup. And Charlie is looking out for Twisted Foxy when it suddenly dawns on her. If Twisted Foxy is here, then he's not in the basement. That basement. There's something in that basement. Clay managed to call into the police station and they send more officers to the house. Jessica puts her foot down and drives to the hospital and they take him into the emergency room. While Clay is getting rushed back, Charlie calls John from the waiting room and asks him if he can get a hold of a ladder and meet her at her house, and that it's direly important. He agrees, half awake but willing to do so. Jessica overhears this and confronts her, and they have a slight argument about Charlie putting herself in danger for this basement. This basement that she's already investigated twice. Charlie tells her everything. About the nightmares, about the feelings, about Sammy, and how there is something down there. How she feels like it is calling out to her. She needs to find it, she has to. And Jessica actually understands. She doesn't think it's a good idea, but she can see the desperation in Charlie's eyes and she believes her. She believes that Charlie might be onto something. The two make up and Jessica caves, agreeing to go with her to the basement. Though insisting that this is the last time. They get to the house and find John already waiting outside, in a borrowed work van with the ladder. She is glad to see him and asks him how he was able to get the stuff. He assures that he borrowed it, and as long as he gets it back without anybody noticing, he might not get immediately fired. They cautiously head inside. The gas smell has only gotten worse and John warns Charlie that there is a serious leak in the house. Charlie says they'll deal with it later. They climb down into the basement and find the air more clear. John decides to stay in the workshop to be a lookout while Charlie and Jessica go deeper in. They look around the area where the animatronics have been kept. Not only do they find how they escaped, having broken through a basement wall and tunneled out to the surface behind the house, but they find something that shocks Charlie to the core. It's a door. No, not just a door. It is the door she has been seeing in her dreams, hidden behind where the twisted ones had been kept. Jessica is equally shocked to find that the door is real and Charlie sees that it is locked with a combination padlock. There's grime on it, smelling of decay, so she realizes Afton must have tried to get in. She starts trying combinations. While she's doing this, Jessica keeps an eye out around the basement when she hears something near the tunnel. She silently edges closer, off to the side to be somewhat hidden, and tries to sneak up and see if there's something coming in. But she cannot see anything. Charlie tries her father's birthday, her mother's, and then hers, and on that last one the padlock opens. She's confused to how Afton couldn't have guessed it. Jessica leans a little closer into the hole and looks up to see what may be outside. But there is nothing there. And then arms reach out of the dirt and grab her. Jessica screams and Charlie spins around and shines her light to see none other than Springtrap uprooting himself out of a shallow grave. Holding Jessica with her arm behind her back and his arm around her throat. He is no longer a vulnerable human under a bed of spring locks. There is no quick fix to stop him. Jessica starts to fight back and Springtrap forcefully manhandles her, either breaking or wrenching her arm in the process. He is paying her no attention, his eyes on Charlie. He assures her that he has no qualms in snapping Jessica's neck and coming for her, but he is tired of chasing her. He's mercifully offering her an out. When Charlie asks what he wants, Afton reaches into the depths of his suit, pushing his hand in through the rotten flesh beneath while Jessica retches, and finally pulls forth a key. It looks like the one Charlie found, save covered in his gore. Charlie asks why he wants it and Afton, having the upper hand, willingly explains. Henry stole his greatest creation and now he can finally get what is rightfully his. There's thumping from upstairs. Afton gleefully reveals that it's the Twisted Ones, that they follow him and obey his commands. As they are his creations. He created the Twisted Ones years ago in this very basement, but Henry found them too early and sealed them away. It is suggested that this was how Henry figured out William's true intentions for building the business. But even they are worthless compared to his true prize. They were initially made to kidnap and kill children, but he switched them go after Charlie once she took the key. Now, he wants that key. And if she doesn't hand it over, She won't have enough time to crawl away before the twisted ones find their way to her and tear her apart. The noises upstairs are getting more intense. It is no longer just the thumping of footsteps, but the guttural wails of the beasts, and the banging of chaos erupting in the house. Having no choice, Charlie tosses over the key and Afton starts to shove both into himself. He does not release Jessica, and he continues to keep eye contact with Charlie. She realizes, with horror, what he is about to do. Right before John rounds the corner and smacks him with a shovel. Having been waiting for Afton to get distracted before going at him. Afton, having thought it was just Charlie and Jessica, is caught by surprise. It's not enough to really damage him, but it does allow Jessica the chance to get free. The twisted ones start dropping into the basement, but they're not alone. Freddy's band followed them and it's an all-out brawl. Now, for time constraints and simplicity's sake, I'm going to skip the entirety of the quote-unquote fight scene here, or what the equivalent of that would be, and go straight to Afton's downfall. Charlie sees that one of the twisted ones has made down through the hole, maybe blocking her way when she's trying to get Jessica to safety. It is Twisted Freddy, who is currently burying itself in the soft dirt where Afton previously lay in wait to ambush them. She gets an idea and goads Afton into coming after her. Perhaps she uses the little taser to do so. It would probably not be that effective on stopping him. Just enough pain to tick him off, maybe the sheer audacity of being shocked like one of his robotic toys sets him off. She runs for the tunnel, and just barely jumps and clears Twisted Freddy. She climbs the thick clawed wall to not slide back in. It looks like she's crawling desperately away from Afton. He finds it so enticing that he doesn't watch his step. Twisted Freddy comes up to meet him and swallows him into his gaping maw of a belly, dragging him down into his would-be grave. But before he can be sucked underneath, Charlie fights Springtrap one last time, reaching into his fetid depths and managing to snatch the keys away from him before he is dragged under. The twisted ones begin to grow confused as they lose Afton's influence. Or perhaps in a twisted irony, Afton's commands for Twisted Freddy to stop devouring him are sending conflicting commands to the others. Freddy's gang gets the upper hand and start to tear them apart piece by piece, exposing their wiring. It only takes one spark in the wrong place to ignite the gas leak. There is a ground-shaking bang as the house bursts into flames above them. It overtakes the house and shakes the foundation, causing parts of the ceiling to fall in, especially in the garage. Charlie makes it to John and Jessica and leads them back to the tunnel. She plans to go with them, but she can't. She can't leave the door. Something pulls her back. She tells John to help Jessica get out and that she'll follow them after she sees what's behind the door. Both plead with her, but finally John budges to get Jessica out, planning on returning afterwards. They try to wait by the tunnel, but eventually the fire spreads overhead and they are forced to escape. Jessica, still injured, runs to her car to call 911 while John calls in for Charlie. The smoke is getting worse, as is the heat, and Charlie realizes that she could very well die here. She even considers going back, but at this point there's nowhere to go but forward. She makes it to the door and lets herself inside, closing it behind her. Thankfully, there is some reprieve from the heat, but she can still taste smoke. Behind the door she finds herself in a short closet. There are spare suits, parts, boxes, memories forgotten to time. She pushes past it all, choking on the smell of smoke and following dried footprints left behind by Afton. He had been in here, but what was it that he was looking for? She finds her answers at the back of the closet. There she finds a large reinforced lockbox. It is secured to the floor and held closed with two sturdy padlocks. This is what the keys were for. She uses the keys to unlock the padlocks and after a moment of hesitation, she opens it up. It's Sammy. She can barely believe it. It's Sammy. He's alive. He's just as she imagined he would be, just as she imagined he would look if he had never been taken. Folded up in this box. Head spinning from confusion and heat, she pulls his limp body out and tries to gently shake him awake. Everything is foggy and fuzzy, her head is heavy, but she forces herself to stay alert and finally he opens his eyes. He looks up at her and smiles, and weakly hugs her. He has been calling for her, she realizes. All this time he's been down here calling for her, for so long, and she has finally heard him. She realizes briefly that something is wrong, that he can't be here, but she's having trouble thinking straight and embraces this reality. Charlie assures him that she never forgot about him and that she missed him. The two embrace as Charlie slips in and out of consciousness, seeing the memory and nightmare that's been haunting her for days. But this time there is no rabbit. It is just her and her brother. It's over. It's finally over. Hours later the fire is finally gotten under control. First responders are still trying to dig into the basement. Clay is there, having checked himself out of the hospital, likely against doctor's orders, as are John, Carlton, and Lamar. Marla is with Jessica who is still at the hospital. One of the responders pulls something out of the rubble and John watches with bated breath, only to realize it's not a person but the remains of Bonnie. Carlton seems somewhat regretful that the animatronics ended up getting burned, but Lamar suggests that at least they went out in a blaze of glory. He then quickly takes it back, insisting that he didn't intend to make a pun at a time like this. One of the officers further in announces that they reached the door. John hastily rushes in and passes the first responders before they can stop him. Carlton and Lamar follow behind him as he reaches the door, forces it open, and rushes in. There he finds Charlie slumped against the wall near the back of the closet, right in front of the open lockbox. He pushes a prop off of her and kneels down beside her to check if she's breathing. Charlie is alive, but is unconscious. Having passed out due to exhaustion, overheating, and poor air quality. He breathes a sigh of relief and starts to gather her in his arms as Carlton and Lamar arrive. He tells them that they need to get her to the first responders and to a hospital, and that she might be suffering from smoke inhalation. Something shifts. John's head snaps back to the lockbox. "John," Carlton says. "That thing just moved." Suddenly the prop that John had pushed aside lurches upright, lifting up from the ground as though dragged by an invisible force until it can get its inhumanely long legs underneath itself. They wobble under the weight of its slender body as it raises to full height, towering over the young men. John stares up in horror at a porcelain face broke into a gaping grin. It stares back, unblinking, unrelenting. It's like nothing he's ever seen before. It's Sammy. In the last moments of the book, we open on the basement at night. Someone is digging in the dirt before eventually grabbing a hand and drawing out none other than William Afton. Now missing everything from the waist down, Afton is revealed to still be alive. He is surprised that they took so long but does show a serviceable amount of gratitude. The person assures him, "Anything for you, Father." The end, for now. Now, I know you probably have a lot of questions. Because this video is so long, I'm going to do an additional video that explains why I chose some of the decisions I did and go deeper into themes and such. I hope you enjoyed my rewrite.